The Bible is incredibly rich in knowledge and wisdom, even for topics that some find common and others do not. And the Bible speaks about sexuality and marriage in a deeper and more sacred way than many imagine. After all, our Creator instituted all things. What does the Bible really teach about oral sex between husband and wife? Have you ever stopped to think about how our intimacy in marriage can reflect the divine plan for the union between husband and wife? Let's go back to the premises in the book of Genesis. God looked at everything he had made and said, "It is very good." And he contemplated all of his creation. The enemy, on the other hand, already condemned, is not content to stay alone. He has to drag many people with him. So my advice is, stay vigilant and armor with heavenly armor. He is an expert at taking what is good, beautiful, and destroying it. In the gospel, John 10 verse 10 shows us that he came, read with me. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. There is nothing more beautiful in creation than our creation as man and woman. There is nothing more sacred in the created order than the love of a man and a woman, and a connection, the union of both when they give themselves to each other, forming a new family, becoming one flesh. The intimacy of a man, the husband, and a woman, the wife, are part of God's plan. Sacred, holy, beautiful. We live in a world where all of this has been horribly erased, horribly distorted, horribly perverted, right? So, the Bible is incredibly rich in knowledge and wisdom, even for topics that some find common and others do not. And the Bible speaks about sexuality and marriage in a deeper and more sacred way than many imagine. After all, our Creator instituted all things. What does the Bible really teach about oral sex between husband and wife? Have you ever stopped to think about how our intimacy in marriage can reflect the divine plan for the union between husband and wife? Let's go back to the premises in the book of Genesis. God looked at everything he made and said, "It is very good." And he contemplated all of his creation. The enemy, on the other hand, already condemned, is not content to stay alone. He has to drag many people with him. So my advice is, stay vigilant and armor with heavenly armor. He is an expert at taking what is good, beautiful, and destroying it. In the gospel, John 10 verse 10 shows us that he came, read with me. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. There is nothing more beautiful in creation than our creation as man and woman. There is nothing more sacred in the created order than the love of a man and a woman, and a connection, the union of both when they give themselves to each other, forming a new family, becoming one flesh. The intimacy of a man, the husband, and a woman, the wife, are part of God's plan. Sacred, holy, beautiful. We live in a world where all of this has been horribly erased, horribly distorted, horribly perverted, right? So, many of the things you understand today as sex are completely distorted from the Word, from what the industry created, from what man created, the worst distortion. What does the Bible really teach about oral sex between husband and wife? Can intimacy in marriage be treated so intimately without losing its sacredness? How can we experience our sexuality in a way that honors God and respects divine principles? These are questions that many ask themselves. The scriptures show us, in their essence, that sex in marriage is a sacred expression of love. The truth is that the Bible, from the beginning, teaches us that our bodies are good and made by God, reflecting His image. Therefore, intimacy between husband and wife should be seen as a blessing and not as something impure or profane. Contrary to what society often preaches, sexual intimacy in marriage has a higher purpose. It is part of God's plan for the mutual union and edification of the couple. Before continuing, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, take the opportunity to click the subscribe button and activate the notifications. This way, you won't miss any important content about the relationship between faith, marriage, and sexuality, always bringing divine principles into our daily lives. And if you know other couples who also have doubts about what the Bible says about intimacy, share this video with them. In Genesis 2, verse 24, it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother, and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." This verse is the foundation of all biblical teaching on marriage. What does that mean? That in God's plan, the union between husband and wife is a sacred and physical bond, reflecting the divine design for intimacy. However, what we need to understand is that intimacy in marriage should not be viewed merely as a physical act. According to the scriptures, the body is good. In Genesis 1 verse 31, God looks at all He has made and says, "And God saw everything that He had made, and behold, it was very good." This includes a human body, and marriage is a place where these bodies become one flesh. Therefore, sexuality, when lived within marriage, is a divine blessing and not something impure. In our modern society, Sexuality has often been distorted, but God's original plan is for the sexual act between husband and wife to be a pure and sacred expression of love. This is a divine purpose. The union of two bodies, where the husband and wife share their love and intimacy, reflecting Christ's own love for the church. Ephesians 5 verses 25 to 33. Now, let's look at the book of Song of Solomon, which offered profound poetry about the love between husband and wife. In Song of Solomon 2 verses 3 to 4 we read, "As an apple tree among the trees of the wood, so is my beloved among the sons. I sat down under his shadow with great delight, and his fruit was sweet to my taste." Here, we see the poetic language that expresses the pleasure and satisfaction that the husband and wife experience in sharing their intimacy. The wife desires to be under the tree's shadow and enjoy the tree's fruits. This can be understood as a metaphor for physical and emotional intimacy between the two. The Song of Solomon then not only exalts physical pleasure in marriage, but also honors the emotional and spiritual depth of that union. God, in creating marriage, created a relationship where sexual intimacy has the potential to be sacred, reflecting his own creation. Where the pleasure of both must be respected and mutually agreed upon, pleasure must be mutual for both as they are one flesh. Marriage is a place where intimacy is preserved, protected, and honored. Now, verse 10 brings an expression of desire and sexual intimacy within marriage. "I am my beloved's, and my beloved is mine," Song of Solomon 7 verse 10. This verse reflects mutual desire in marriage. Here, the wife expresses her total surrender to her husband, and he respects and desires her in a loving and pure way. The Bible teaches us that sexual intimacy is a sacred part of the marital relationship, where both spouses become one flesh. Genesis 2 verse 24, united in love and respect. The practice of oral sex can be seen as an expression of this intimate union, when practiced with mutual respect and consent. This is not just about pleasure, but about a moment of deep connection, reflecting love and respect between the spouses. Sexuality in Christian marriage is not something impure, but something that should be lived in a sacred and respectful manner. Song of Solomon 7 and other biblical passages highlight the beauty and depth of conjugal love, where sex, including oral sex, is an expression of mutual love and respect between husband and wife. Song of Solomon 4 verse 16 speaks of the wife inviting the husband to come closer and enjoy marital intimacy with her. The language used here, "Come, O north wind, come, O south, and blow upon my garden of delights. Come, my beloved, to his garden, my garden now is his, and taste its fruits," is a rich metaphor, using the image of the garden and fruits as symbols of sexual pleasure and intimate and loving relationship between husband and wife. Metaphorically, the garden mentioned represents the wife, and she has invited her husband to enjoy her beauty and the pleasure she offers. The wind may symbolize the intensity of desire and pleasure, while tasting the fruits. It is understood that when we taste something, it is through the palate. It is a metaphor for the physical and sexual pleasure that happens within the marital union. Although the text does not explicitly mention oral sex, we can understand the metaphor of tasting the fruits as a reference to sexual practices that celebrate mutual pleasure and the union of a couple. This is an invitation to fully enjoy marital intimacy, including physical and emotional aspects, without the shame or distortions often associated with sexuality. The fact is that when we look at passages like Leviticus and Deuteronomy, we find clear regulations on issues like sex between men, sex with animals, and sex during menstruation. However, the Bible does not provide specific guidelines for what can or cannot be done when it comes to sex within marriage between husband and wife, which has led to many divergent interpretations about what is appropriate in the sexual sphere of marriage. In Paul's letters, one of the main defenders of marital relationships in the Bible, we do not find a direct mention of specific sexual practices between husband and wife. For example, in Romans 1 verses 18 to 32, Paul talks about sexual practices that were common in pagan cults and that, in the end, were blasphemy against God. He mentions practices involving relations between women and men who engage in acts outside the context of marriage, but does not address what would be appropriate or inappropriate within marriage. Although he refers to sexual practices that violate the natural order, the relationship between husband and wife is not explicitly discussed in these terms. In 1 Corinthians 7 verse 4, Paul offers an important teaching. The wife does not have power over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, a husband does not have power over his own body, but the wife does. This passage is often misinterpreted to justify using the other's body selfishly or abusively. However, what Paul really teaches here is mutual surrender and respect in marriage, which is in harmony with the concept that the couple is one flesh. Genesis 2 verse 24, Ephesians 5 verses 28 to 31. When Paul says that one does not have power over their own body, he is pointing to the need for mutual surrender. If one disrespects or mistreats the other, they are mistreating themselves because both share the same flesh. Sexuality within marriage, according to Paul, should be marked by respect and love. It is not a unilateral right of one over the other, but a mutual commitment to care for and satisfy the physical and emotional needs of the spouse. Each part of the body should be used to build and love, not to exploit or abuse. Throughout the Bible, the relationship between husband and wife is always described as a relationship of love, honor, and mutual respect. Christian marriage is not a place for abuse or manipulation, but for unity, respect, and mutual care. The couple must be willing to listen and understand each other's feelings, always seeking the well-being of the partner. If you feel uncomfortable with any practice suggested by your spouse, it is essential that the communication be open and honest. Talking about what is comfortable or not is part of a healthy and respectful relationship. The Bible teaches us that the limits in marriage, including those related to sexual pleasure, should be guided by conscience and spiritual discipline. God communicates with us through conscience, and we must be attentive to what makes us feel peace or discomfort. By disrespecting our own conscience, we risk acting against what God guides us. It is possible to grow in intimacy, affection, and sexual satisfaction within marriage without resorting to harmful or forced practices. Marriage is a place of mutual learning, where both spouses strive to understand each other's needs and connect emotionally and physically. The search for pleasure should be balanced with respect and commitment to the dignity of the other. There are many Christian resources that offer healthy guidance on how to cultivate a blessed sexual relationship. Serious literature on marriage and Christian sexuality can help couples find ways to grow together, both in love and intimacy, without compromising their faith or convictions. The goal is to achieve more unity, happiness, and satisfaction in marriage, always respecting the principles given by God. The Bible does not give us a list of specific rules for all sexual practices within marriage, but teaches us to live in a way that respects and honors our spouse. Marriage is a reflection of the relationship between Christ and the church, and sexuality within this relationship should be seen as something pure, blessed, and free from any form of abuse or distortion. Intimate practices should be based on love, respect, and mutual surrender, always aligned with the spiritual and ethical principles that God has taught us. By following these principles, we can grow in unity and pleasure, finding in sexual intimacy an expression of love and commitment. However, in our modern society, sexual intimacy often becomes distorted. We are bombarded by messages that objectify the human body and treat sexuality in a vulgar and irreverent way. Pornography, for example, has a way of destroying the sanctity of intimacy between husband and wife. This can lead couples to a misguided view of sexuality and distort what is, in fact, a sacred and blessed act by God. In 1 Corinthians 6, verse 18, Paul warns us against sexual immorality. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. Sexuality within marriage should reflect the love and honor each spouse has for the other. Couples should seek to live their intimacy in a pure way, where physical pleasure is not separated from the emotional and spiritual building of the relationship. The Bible teaches us that intimacy in marriage is good, blessed, and part of God's plan for the union of the spouses. When lived within the parameters of respect, sacrificial love, and open communication, sex within marriage is a reflection of the unity that God desires for couples. It is essential that husbands and wives share not only physical pleasure, but also emotional and spiritual care, honoring each other in all aspects of the relationship. So, have you reflected on the role of sexuality within your marriage? How has your view on the body and intimacy been? Remember, God created marriage as a place of sacred intimacy, where love is lived in a pure and true way. Do not let the distortions of the world take away the beauty of God's plan for your married life, nor let religiosity take away what God has granted. If this video has helped you reflect more on marriage in light of biblical teachings, share it with other couples. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, click subscribe right now to continue learning more about how to live according to divine principles in all areas of life. See you in the next video, which I prepared for you here on the channel.